This is chapter 20 of the book by Jerry Bridges called Respectable Sins. This is chapter 20, and it's called Worldliness. Worldliness means different things to different people. For our Amish friends, it means such things as electricity, telephones, and automobiles. For the very conservative church in which I grew up, it was a list of prohibited activities, such as dancing, card playing, and going to movies. Without meaning to denigrate either of these views, we should understand that worldliness is much broader than a list of prohibited activities or modern-day conveniences. Two passages of Scripture will help us understand the concept of worldliness. The first is 1 John 2, 15 and 16, where John exhorts us not to love the world and then describes the things of the world as the sinful desires of the flesh and eyes, as well as pride and possessions. These three expressions seem to indicate that John has in mind desires and attitudes that we should, or that we would see today as being clearly sinful. Since we've been considering what I call more acceptable or subtle sins, there's another passage from Paul that will help us understand the acceptable aspects of worldliness. That passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 31, which is translated in the NIV as, "Those who use the things of the world as if not engrossed in them. For this world in its present form is passing away." Well, different translations use different expressions to convey the same thought. The warning, then, is that though we use the legitimate things of the world, we should handle them with care lest they become too important to us. Now, based on Paul's writing in 1 Corinthians 7:31, I define worldliness as being attached to, engrossed in, or preoccupied with the things of this temporal life. The things of this temporal life may or may not be sinful in themselves. But what makes our attitude toward things that are not sinful worldliness is the high value that we put on them. Paul tells us in Colossians 3:2, "Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth." The things we value most should be things that are above. That is, spiritual things, such as the Bible, prayer, the gospel, obedience to God, the fulfillment of the Great Commission, and most of all, God Himself. These are the areas where our values should be focused, not on even the legitimate things of this life. The non-Christian world clearly does not focus on things of God. Even our nice, decent, but unbelieving neighbors are focused on this life only. Now, by definition, they cannot be focused on the things that are above. Yet their lifestyles are outwardly not much, if any, different from ours. They mow their grass, they pay their taxes, and avoid scandalous sins, just like we do. That's why living among them makes worldliness look so acceptable to us. So we can further develop our understanding of worldliness by this secondary definition. Worldliness means accepting the values, mores, and practices of the nice but unbelieving society around us without discerning whether or not those values, mores, and practices are biblical. Worldliness. It's just going along with the culture around us as long as that culture is not obviously sinful. Now, worldliness is a broad subject worthy of an entire book, and I'm devoting only a chapter to it. So I'm going to limit our discussion of it to three areas that I believe have become acceptable sins to us: money, immorality, and idolatry. Now, this list may startle you because I have used two words, immorality and idolatry, that are clearly unacceptable. But there are certain aspects of both that have become acceptable, and it is with those we look at it. And even with money, there are certain activities, such as stealing, fraud, and embezzlement, that are clearly unacceptable sins. So in all three areas, we will limit ourselves to what seems acceptable to us. Money. America is the wealthiest nation in the world, and our prosperous middle class is unparalleled in all of history. But the way we handle money is scandalous. In 2004, the average household income after taxes was $52,200. And yet, as I mentioned in chapter 13, the average household credit card debt is $7,000. Even worse, from that income of over $52,000 a year, the average household's giving for all causes was a mere $794, about 1.5%. The above statistics are, of course, based on our entire population. Surely evangelicals do better than that. Yes, they do, but not much. In 2003 survey, members of 8 evangelical denominations gave 4.4% of their income to God's work. This was actually a decline from the 6.2% that members of those same denominations gave in 1968. If those 8 denominations are reflective of evangelicalism as a whole, it means that we are becoming less generous toward God with our money. Not only are we giving less to our churches, but it seems that more of what we do give is spent on ourselves. In 1920, the percentage of giving to missions from total offerings was just over 10%. But by 2003, that figure had declined to just under 3%. That means we spend 97 cents of every dollar on our own local programs and ministries, while sending 3 cents overseas. So in summary, it appears that evangelical households are keeping more of their income for themselves and giving less to their churches. And churches are keeping more of what they do receive for their own ministries and programs, and sending less of it to missions working overseas. I'm not saying I endorse this. This is Jerry Bridges' words out of his book. And I told you from the get, I may not endorse or believe in the same things he's saying, but overall, it's a book that I'm reading. But anyhow, yet we are the richest nation in history. Now, if our giving is decreasing and our credit card debt is increasing, what are we doing with our money? We know we are not saving it, for our savings as a percentage of income is also quite low, somewhere around 2%. So what all this means is that we are spending it on the things of this life: houses, cars, clothes, vacations, and expensive electronic products, just to name a few. So with our money, we have set our minds not on the things above, but on things that are on the earth. We have become worldly in our use of money. So how much should we be giving? I believe a minimum, this is Jerry Bridges now, I believe a minimum benchmark is 10%, or to use a biblical expression, a tithe. Now I know there is some disagreement as to whether or not tithing is a biblical standard in our New Testament era, since it is not mentioning specifically in any of the New Testament letters. But there is a concept of proportionate giving, that is, according as God has prospered us. Now, a tithe is a specific application of proportionate giving. Under it, the person who makes $10,000 gives $1,000. The person who makes $100,000 gives $10,000. Both people have given proportionally as God has prospered them. Now, there is added thought that perhaps the person making $100,000 can afford to give more than 10%. That's why I regard the tithe as a minimum benchmark. Now, I believe the concept of tithing has fallen on hard times. Not because it is no longer considered a biblical concept, but because we have become worldly in our attitude toward money and consequently have become stingy towards God. So I'll do part 2 of worldliness next time. This is a rather long chapter. So next reading, we'll finish the rest of the chapter on worldliness. Till next time.